What's up, YouTube? It's time for a review of the new The Haunted record Strength in Numbers, out this past Friday, August 25th. Recording this review at almost 2:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. You know, sometimes you just gotta live on the edge. And what better way to live on the edge than to blog on the internet? So The Haunted are a band that are still going strong after over 20 years since the original breakup of At the Gates and the subsequent formation of The Haunted. As a fan, I cannot recommend enough the band's second record, The Haunted Made Me Do It. Just one of those classic earache releases that definitely deserves a spot in your collection if it's not already there. Though if you ask me, it's kind of a misunderstood record. Like, The Haunted in general are just victims of context, I feel like. The band shows up out of the ashes of At the Gates and have a sound that really is all their own, but people can't help but compare them to At the Gates. So The Haunted for most of their career have either been At the Gates Part 2, if it's positively connotated, or if it's negative, At the Gates' unwanted stepchildren. Which, when it comes to that second record especially, it's just so off to think of it that way. The Haunted Made Me Do It is an interesting blend of styles, especially for the year 2000 when it came out. Because sure, it's got some of that signature melodic death metal riffing that predates the whole American metalcore explosion, but it's also an album that's hugely indebted to thrash, and Slayer in particular, which it's interesting to note that at the time this record came out, not even Slayer sounded like Slayer. And there's some groove metal, which is era appropriate. Also with tracks like Leech, there's some straight up death metal as well. So in reality, that record and a portion of its surrounding discography is, to me at least, kind of difficult to categorize. All that being said, here we are 17 years later with the band's 9th album, Strength in Numbers, which has a sound that is a lot easier for me to categorize. Because while it has some touches of melodic death metal here and there and a few decent helpings of groove as well, much of this record can fit pretty snugly under that modern thrash umbrella. Many of these songs are blistering and just overflowing with frantic, frenzied, razor-sharp thrash riffs and equally balls-to-the-wall drumming to match. And frontman Marco Aro delivers his signature vocals, which are a bit harsher in tone than most other bands that you'd label modern thrash, but not to the point where you'd hear these songs and go, oh, I'm listening to extreme metal. No, the overall effect of this album is like if you were to listen to Testament's The Gathering, but Chuck Billy sounds even meaner. And with this review, I'm only looking to answer one question. Because if I've established that this is essentially a modern thrash record with a few unique detours, when you put this record up against so-called thrash records from the past couple years, especially from veterans like Exodus and Overkill and Slayer and Metallica, those albums pale in comparison to this new record from The Haunted. Seriously, this is unfucking believable. It is head and shoulders above other albums of its ilk, many of them from thrash's leaders, and I want to sit here and try to figure out why. So one possibility might be this album's exceptional attention to great songs, as opposed to just these songs being piles of riffs, which is a big issue that I discussed in my reviews of the latest Overkill and the latest Metallica record. This record, by contrast, has just this laser focus on songs, to the point where even though these tracks are really riff-driven, the riffs will sort of part the seas for a great hook to come in and sort of round everything out. Maybe the best example of this is the third track, Spark, which might be my favorite song on the whole album. For the first minute and a half, this song is just barreling forward and kicking your ass when all of a sudden everything stops and these clean guitars come in and introduce the super tuneful, super melodic descending guitar line that is then revealed to be the chorus. And what a chorus it is. You find yourself not only screaming along with Marco, but humming that guitar line. You walk away from the song humming the guitars. Boom, 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 you know? And the following track, Preachers of Death, is another great example and another one of my favorite tracks. And later in the track list, you have a song like Means to an End, which with that song, the chorus is so chord driven and so interval driven, but the riffs that surround it are like pure Exodus style. So that song has such a nice balance to it. Going off of this point about the choruses, another factor might be Marco Aro's vocal style, because he's completely intelligible and you can understand every single word he's saying, yet he's a lot meaner and a lot harsher than a Bobby Blitz or a James Hetfield. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, where you can sing along with the music, but you get, I think, a higher level of anger and a higher level of power in the songs. A great example of where this comes into play is the song Brute Force, which features some really violent, really confrontational lyrics. And musically, the song is as pummeling and as no frills as a fucking thrash song can be. So hearing Marco just roar lyrics like, "Should I kill myself or everyone around me?" it allows his lyrics to appropriately meet the intensity of the music. Catchy, melody-heavy guitar solos don't hurt either, and songs like Preachers of Death and This Is the End feature some killer solos. Actually, another huge asset to this album is Jonas Bjork's bass playing. Holy shit! This is an album just full of great bass moments. Strength in Numbers is not at all one of those metal records where the bass is just buried behind the riffs. And a lot of that credit has to go to producer Russ Russell, who in general made this album just a sonic monster. My favorite bass moment might be that riff at the end of the song The Fall, where if you listen closely, the guitars drop out for a second and the bass just does this epic slide, and I get a chuckle out of it every time. There are some crazy bass fills in the title track in that section right before the chorus. And the closing song Monuments has a really cool bass intro that just is so wonderfully locked in with that tom groove. So yeah, that's another thing that separates this album is the bass playing. And of course I gotta touch on the length here, both the tight, compact, efficient individual songs and the album as a whole, which is an intro track and 9 full songs and just 38 minutes. Whenever I'm listening through to this thing beginning to end, whenever I arrive at the song The Fall, I always find myself thinking like, wow, I'm already at the third to last song and I feel like no time has gone by. And that couldn't be a better sign for the efficiency and fillerless nature of this album. Now contrast that with the last Overkill record, which there could have been 15-20 minutes taken right off the top and no one would have noticed or cared. The only time this album ever starts to feel a tad predictable is the song Tighten the Noose, which kicks off the second half with a pretty standard thrash attack. It's not a bad song, it just starts to feel like, okay, I feel like we've heard this before. But luckily, with the song immediately following it, This Is the End, as well as the closing track, Monuments, the band switched things up a bit. This Is the End, what a fucking stomping groove. That main riff is the one riff out of all these that I found most sticking in my head since this album came out. It's good that they threw this song in because it stands out in a good way. And Monuments also allows the band to retreat into something a bit more atmospheric to send the album off. Some truly apocalyptic lyrics on this one, and I think it's a really cool ending with those clean guitars and the creepy whispering vocals. God, there is just fucking nothing negative that I can say about this album. I cannot believe how good it is. I haven't been this stoked about a new metal album in months. The Haunted they put on a clinic with this one. Outstanding riffing, yet still a big emphasis on great songs as opposed to just smushed together ideas. This album is short and immediate and explosive, but it still takes the time to round itself out a bit with some different styles and different tempos, so you're never just bored. And I don't want to suck this album off too much, because at the end of the day, it's not this album that's gonna like redefine the genre or make some sort of historical impact necessarily. It's just that I am enjoying the fuck out of it. It just meets all of the criteria that I have for this style of metal. And I just know that 4 months from now, I'm going to be sitting right here talking about it again when it's time to do the best metal albums of 2017. This has to be a contender. So if you're a metal fan, you gotta give this a listen. It so exceeded my expectations. And if you're at all into thrash or sure, melodic death metal, you're just going to eat this album up. How's that for a fucking 3 a.m. review? Boom! Strength in Numbers gets an 8 out of 10 from me. As always, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, or shoot me a message so we can continue to talk music, and I will see you guys soon.